Hi, and welcome to Dime's Block of the Month. I'm PJ Wong, and I'll be guiding you through the block. And this month we'll be doing what I'm calling the pieced octagon. So here's an image of our block, and this is a picture of the actual block that's been stitched out. And then here it is in a 9-patch layout. So, all right, let's get started. And I'm going to go ahead and open my block piecer. And you'll see my inspiration page, and don't forget to download your free designs. I'm going to go ahead and open up a new page, and I'm going to be building the artwork for this particular block today. So I'm going to look at my settings, and I've got my snap to grid on, and my grid settings are set at 1/2 inch, and that works. This is going to have 1-inch borders. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is just set up kind of a guide box, and I'm going to use a 7-inch box. So I just did a left press and drag from the top left to the bottom right. It doesn't matter if it's in the center of the screen, and it does not have to be the exact size because we're going to change that right now. So I've used my select tool to highlight that, and I'm going to go over here to my transform, and I have a 4x4 box here, so I can check my maintain aspect ratio, and I'm just going to type in 7. So now we've got our 7-inch square, and I'm going to zoom out just a bit so that we can see the entire square, and then I'm going to center that. So if I go up here to my ruler bar, if I right click and then left click on center origin, now I'm exactly at the center, which is exactly where I want to be. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the top and the bottom. Those go all the way across. So I'm just going to go back to my artwork tool and to my rectangle. I'm going to choose a different color. And I'm just going to left press and drag out a rectangle, and it's snapping into the grid. So there's my 1-inch. These are 1/2 inch segments. So there's my 1-inch, and then down on the bottom, there's my bottom border. And then I'm going to change color yet again. So just right clicking on my little color chip. And here are my side borders. Okay. Then to get the little triangles in the corner, once again, I'm going to change colors. It just helps over here on my sequence bar. If you change colors for each segment, they'll come up in separately here. So here are my 2 top borders and my side borders. So I've changed colors yet again. So I'm going to put, whoops, I had those highlighted. Click off, now change color. So for my little triangles, what I like to do on this is just drag in a square, and then I delete one of my corners. And I think that these were actually 1.5 inches, so I'm just gonna make this 1.5 inches, and then with my shape tool I'm just gonna select my bottom node and then single click left and then right click and say delete point. So now I've got my triangle. So I'm just gonna copy that triangle. Need to get back to my select tool. Copy and paste and then rotate that and then drag it into position down here, and it will snap right in place. You can then actually select both, and you can either just select one by left clicking and then hold down your control key and select the other one. You can also just come over here. If I click off, you'll see this. If I come over here to my sequence, I can just select the heading and they're both selected. So I can now copy and paste, and then I can mirror these and then move them into position over here on the right side. Okay, so a couple different ways to get to the same result. You can either, well, actually 3 different ways. You could have just copied and pasted this and rotated around and then copy and paste and rotate around, or you could copy and mirror, which is what I did. It just saves you a few clicks. Okay, so we've got almost all of our artwork. The only thing that we're missing is our center. So to do that, I'm going to select yet a different color, And then I'm going to go up here to my artwork and I'm going to choose a star, which may seem kind of bizarre because that is not a star shape, but there's a lot of points that are already in here. So I'm just going to drag my points into position. And I can actually now get rid of these 2 extra points, and I did a drag to select and then right click and delete points. I just find that sometimes easier than actually adding a bunch of points. So over here I kind of missed my intersection. So there we go. So now we've got all of our artwork in there. None of it's filled, but that's okay. And if you collapse this over here, you can see. So now this very first square that I drew, that was just my guideline so I would know where to put my borders. I don't need that any longer, so I'm just selecting it and I'm using my delete key on my keyboard, and now that's gone. Okay, so I can start previewing some fabrics now. So I'm going to select this first section and I'm going to go up here to my properties, up to my fabric tab, and I'm going to choose my 3 little dots. And depending on what fabrics you've got loaded is what you'll be able to preview. So I'm going to go into my beach sewing collection. And this top one is the blue check. So I'm going to scroll down here and find my blue check. And because I chose the heading over here, both of those pieces of artwork are selected. So I'll be able to fill both of them at the same time and I can say okay to that. So there's my blue check. I can do the same thing on the next section. And once again over to fabrics and then click my little dots and beach sewing, and this one was the green check. And then onto my little corners, same process, beach sewing. And this is where you can preview. So on this particular one, I've actually used in my sample, I've used the orange check, but what if I want to choose something different? I can go back and say I want to try the scissors. Not seeing very much of the scissors, so maybe that's not the best one, but I could try dots. That might be a little bit busy, but you can see that you can preview any of the fabrics that are in your collection. So, all right, I am going to go back and put that back to the orange check and say okay to that. So now the only one I've got left is my center, which is this next piece right here. And once again, so I've highlighted it from my sequence bar, gone to my fabrics, clicked my dots, and then I'm going to go down and fill this just with the white scissors. Okay, so there's all of my artwork set up. Now I just need to build the stitchings. So with my select tool, I'm just going to do a left press and drag to select everything. You could also do a Control A, which is a select all. And I'm going to go up to my workflow tool and I'm going to change my seam allowance to 0.375. It just gives you a little bit more wiggle room. And I am going to say auto build. And then I'm going to look for my preview. Oh, I'm going to sort my numbers first. There we go. And then my preview. So we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Exactly what we want. So now I'm just going to choose save. And I am going to put this into, this should go into my C Dime Designs. I've created a folder for 2018 block of the month, and I am going to call this, it will create this folder. So this is my 4 block, and this is the pieced, oh, I guess I could put a space in there. pieced octagon. All right, and I'm going to say save to that. And what this is going to give me is, this is your stitching file. This is the artwork that we'll need. I think we'll see the preview here. Can we see that on the screen? Let me get that so it fits. Okay, so here is your stitching file, and here is the artwork file. There's the artwork. And then you'll get a PDF preview, and it will show you, let's scooch this over so that you can kind of see a little bit more of it. You'll get an image of your block with your fabrics. You'll get the actual stitching, which is basically this file. And then this is kind of, to me, the really important bit. You'll get all of your guided step-by-steps. This is for all of your placement. This is your right side tacking, and then your seaming and your tack downs. So handy information to have. All right. So our block is all set up, so I can just close this now. So then before I go anywhere else, I'm going to go up to my cutting, and I am once again going to choose 0.375. So your seam allowances on when you set up for your stitching file and when you set up for your cutting file, your seam allowances need to match up, or else things will not come out the way you expect them. And I have this set to paper, which will automatically send out a PDF file. If you were going to use an electronic cutter, you can set up for that as well. So I'm just going to say apply to this, and then this is going to go through and it's going to show me all of my sections, everything that I need right there. So I'm then going to save that, and I'm going to put it under my 04 pieced octagon, and I'm going to just call this cut files. Oops, can't spell today, or type, I'm not sure which one. Okay, and then once again you're going to get a preview of this, and here are your actual cut files with the numbers on them for your pieces, and then a preview once again. So here's your block, and then this next section is telling you how much fabric that you're going to need for each one, depending on how many blocks you chose when you set up your cut. Okay, so I can now close that, and then I can close out of this, and I can go on over to my quilt embellisher, and we'll get our embellishment set up. So here we are at my quilt embellisher, and again you'll get your My Inspiration page and free designs. So I'm just going to X out of there, and I am going to open up a new page, and then I'm going to switch over here to my library, and here is my 2018 block of the month. So I'm just going to expand that, and here is my pieced octagon. Here's the piece of artwork that I need. So I'm just going to left press and drag that onto the work area of my screen, and then I'm just going to right click, whoops, right click and center that. Okay, so and you can see here's the center, here's my 0 and my 0. All right, so my grid, this time I want my snap to grid on, and my grid settings are at 1/4 of an inch here, and I think that that's fine. I actually want to be able to find the center of this, and then also I'm going to set up for my heart, so that will work. Okay, and my snap to grid is on. Okay, so if we go back and look at the finished block, we've got this fun heart motif. We've got some embellishments going down the borders, and then the heart motif in the center. So the way we're going to set up this heart motif is very similar to the way that we set up, here's a closer look, in the block number 1 when we did the diamonds. So this is going to be a very similar process, but just with hearts instead. All right, so back to my quilt embellisher. So I can just click off of this, and I can go over here to my sequence view. So this is all grouped together, which is perfect. And you could lock this. I'm just using this as a guide for what I'm going to be doing. So I could lock that if I want to make sure that I'm not going to accidentally grab a piece of that or move it out of the way. So I'm going to come up here to my artwork, and there happens to be a heart in here. So I'm just chosen the heart, and you can see there's now a heart attached to my cursor. That means I'm in the heart. So I'm just going to drag this heart out, and I'm going to say about that. You can always adjust. So I want this to be almost up to the edge up here, and I don't want it quite to the center here because I want a little bit of space in between. I'm going to call that good. It can probably be just a little teeny tiny bit taller. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this into stitches. So while that's still selected, I'm going to come up here to my run tool, and then I'm going to tell it I want it to be a bean stitch, and I want a 4mm stitch length here. So I'm just going to apply that. And I can look at my true view, and sure enough, there's my bean stitch. So the next thing that I want to look at before I go copying and rotating all of these is I want to know where my stop and start is. So if I choose my shape tool, I've got my stop and start down at the bottom, which is exactly where I want. So the green is the start and the red is the stop. So those are down at the bottom, which is exactly where I want them to be. All right, so I've got this selected, and I'm simply going to copy and paste that, and then I'm going to hit the rotate button twice. And then I'm going to position this so that it's centered on my 0 mark here, and then the same distance away from the top here. Okay, so then I'm just going to do that again, copy paste, rotate, rotate, position, and your snap to grid is on, so it should snap into place, and then once again copy paste, rotate, rotate. After you do this a few times, you'll get very quick at it. All right, so there are all my hearts. So now, like we did on the first block, if this were to run, and actually if I take off my true view and if I hide my backdrop and my grid, can you see these little dotted lines? That's actually showing you that there's going to be a jump stitch. What we want is we actually want it to stitch the heart and then do a run line from this point to this point, and then from here to here, here to here, here to here, and then back up to the start, so that we don't have a whole lot of jumps and trims. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some what I call little connector lines. So I've chosen my run path tool up here at the top, and I'm going to turn these a different color. So I'm going to go to red, and this is just so I can keep them separated. So I'm just left clicking and then right clicking, and then left click, right click, left click, right, left, right. Okay, so what I've got now is I've got a whole bunch of little run sections in here. I need to just now move these up into order so that there's one of these after every single heart. So I'm gonna just drag these up into position. And I did them different colors so it makes it easier to do this part. All right, so now if we look at this, we have our first heart and then a run, and right now they're different colors. But shortly here, we're going to change that, and we've got, I just copied something inadvertently, so I just did an undo. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of this two ways. You can just literally drag select because there's nothing else on your screen. I can go back and double check. So your type here, we turned the hearts into a bean stitch, but then when I did this, it was just a single run line. So I'm going to go back and turn everything back to a bean with a 4.0 stitch. And 3 repeats is fine. And I'm going to say apply to that. So now if we go back, oops, the other thing I was going to do was turn those all the same color. So You could do the drag select. You could also choose the top one on your sequence view and hold down your control key and select the bottom one. Oops, shift key. There you go. Okay, so now I'm going to turn everything the same color. So I'm just going to turn those green. So now everything is together here. So if we turn on our true view and if we go up here to our sequence, you can see it's going to start here and then it's going to run to the next one and then do the next heart. So it's all one path instead of stopping. If we hadn't put these little connectors in, it would have sewed this and then stopped and tied off and then jumped over to here, tie off. Okay, so now what we're going to do is get the rest of the hearts in here, and I can turn this stuff back on now if I want, and that was locked anyway, and I can collapse this to make it a little easier to see. So I can select all of this, and if I go, let me pull up the picture back up here. So basically what this is, it's just, so here's the set that we just did, the top, the bottom, the right, and the left. So these guys are just exactly that same design at an angle. So I'm going to copy and paste, and then I'm going to rotate these. I'm going to turn them color just so that we can see what's going on here, and then I'm going to rotate, and I'm just going to go one to the left. So if you wanted to do these in two different colors, you could simply just leave it at that, and actually that's kind of fun. So one thing I want to show you though is if you turn these all the same color, can you see this little funky jump stitch right here? It's because this and your last stitch is going to come in here, and then your next section is going to start here. So if you want to alleviate that, if you're going to do this all in one color, here's what you're going to do. I'm going to turn this back into the purple again, just to make it easier to figure out where we're going to put our extra little run stitch. So I'm going to go back to my run tool, and I'm going to choose yet a different color, and I'm going to zoom in on this, and I'm just going to go from here to this intersection and to here, and then right click. So left click, left click, left click. And I'm going to make that stitch, I'm going to leave it at a single run line so that it'll just kind of get buried in there. And I'm going to make it a 4.0 stitch length as well though. And then I'm going to move this up to the bottom of that first section. So here's our first set of runs, and then here's our little single run line connector, and then our second set. So now if I turn all of this green, you'll see I no longer have that little jump stitch going from here to here because it's actually going to run down here and run here. It'll get buried because when the last stitch comes through here back to here, it'll just cover it up. You'll never notice that there's anything different there. Okay, so this would probably be a good time to save. So I'm just going to do File, Save As, and this, you're going to want this to be in the same spot that all the rest of your information is, which should be in your C, Dime, Designs, and Pieced Octagon. All right, so I'm going to copy the front part of this name so that I can keep everything straight, and I'm just going to change the back half of this, and I'm calling this EMB for embellishments. All right, and I'm going to say save to that. Okay, so now it's time to add in our top and our side. So I need a line in there because we're basically going to use these lines. So just left click, and then a right click to finish off that line. And then left click, right click, and then here as well. Left click, right click, and left click, right click. Okay, I'm going to collapse this guy and then go down here. So these two, the bottom two, are my vertical, And again, I'm going to change those to a different color just to make life easier so we can see. So here's our horizontal and here's our vertical. Okay, so I'm going to select my horizontal lines here, and under type I can go here and I could choose Crazy Quilting, and if I click on my little dots the images will come up. So say that I choose this particular motif. I can say okay to this, and my stitch length is at 3, so if I apply that you can barely see that. So if I make this larger, that's better. So if I wanted it to fill the whole thing, maybe I can go even farther. Okay, so one thing I want you to pay attention to when you're doing these motifs, and it just kind of depends on which motif you choose, so you have to kind of check all of them if you're when you're going to use them. So if I turn off my grid, it might be easier to see. You can also, under view, stitch ends. So, and this might be easier if this is off. Okay, so can you see these little dots? These are actually your needle penetrations. So what we want to do is pay attention to how far it is between those needle penetrations. So in this case, this is 0.29 of an inch, so just over a quarter of an inch, which is not too bad. That's probably about as far as you would want to go. So, but that's just one of the things that you should pay attention to. So I'm going to turn all of this back on again, and I'm going to choose the fish just because I think that they're cute, and I'm going to say apply to that. Okay, and if I click off, it might be a little easier to see, and if I turn my true view back on. So when I put these lines in, you may have noticed that I started from here and went to here, and then I went here to here. And you can see that my fish are going in opposite directions, which I actually like, and it's the most efficient way for that to stitch as well, because it's going to start here and then it's going to go to here. If you wanted them both going in the same direction, you would need to do your lines going in the same direction. So all right, so my fish are in there and I'm all good with that. So now I'm going to go to my horizontals, and once again I can choose, let's see what we've got in motifs. So in motifs, you're just going to have a drop down menu, and there's tons of them in here, and this is one of those things you kind of have to just play with to see what you're going to like. This might be a fun one. It's not too bad. We can probably make that bigger. Oh, I kind of like that. So that would pretty well fill that in. And you can see here, if this is a 4mm stitch length, I'm going to guess that probably is pretty close to that as well. So that would work. And then we could turn that a different color as well. If I want to get a pink up here, I can just add a color and then left click to bring my color chips up, and I'm going to give it that color, neon pink, and then right click to apply that color. So there are all of our embellishments. So here's our center motif, and then our horizontal and our verticals. Okay, so one more thing I forgot to do back here on this. So we need to kind of look and see where we have tie-in and tie-offs. So really what we want is we want to tie in when we very first start, and then we want to tie off when we end. But in the middle of that, it can just run from one segment to the other. It will save time and it will make for a cleaner stitch out. So I've got this whole section selected, and I'm going to go up here to my commands, and this should be normal, normal, and then I'm going to set everything to none, none, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to fix the first one and the last one. So I'm just going to say apply to that. Now I need to expand this so I can get to the first one. So on the very first one, I'm going to tell it I want it to tie in and apply that. And on the last one, I want to tie off. Okay, so we are all good to go. So I'm just going to collapse all of that, And once again, I'm just going to save. Okay, so now I'm going to combine my embellishments with my piecing file so that everything is all in one place. So I'm going to go back up here to open, and here's my piecing section. I'm going to open this. So open to that. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put in my basting border to hold my blocks into the block maker. So I am just going to start with a rectangle, and I'm going to zoom in up here just a little bit, and I'm using my crosshair. I'm using this guideline, and I'm just going to left press and drag, and then I'll adjust. So I can just select this, and I'm going to adjust it over to this line and down to this line. Okay, so I'm going to turn this into a run stitch, so it's selected already. So I'm just going to choose my convert to run, and since it's basting, I'm going to give it a 4mm stitch length. And then I want to apply a color that is like no other color in here, just so that it's easy for me to find. And I'm going to just click on my little plus to add another color, and this is usually crocus. So I'm just going to right click and turn that into that color. Okay, so now my piecing file is set up. So I'm going to go back to my embroidery, which is down here, and I'm just going to choose all of my embellishments. So my center, my top, and my vertical. So I just selected all of those, and I'm just going to come up here and say copy, and then go to my pieced file and say paste. And that will paste all of that right in there on top, and you'll know that everything is exactly where it's supposed to be. So the last thing that I have to do Okay, so then to keep your pieces in your block maker to start with, we also need a basting border. So I've got this border selected, and I'm just going to copy and paste it, and I'm going to move the second one down to the very end, which might seem a little bit strange, but what that will do is then all of these, the stitches, all these will, the numbering will line up to what you've already created in your from my block piecer, and you're going to actually stitch the last color first to tack your blocks together, and then you'll stitch through everything else, and you'll skip this one when you get to the end. All right, so that's all set up exactly the way that I want it. So all I'm going to do now is do File, Save As, and I'm going to call this all because it's both of my designs together. And I'm just going to save that, and then save that out as whatever stitch format you need for your actual machine. So I'm just going to save this out to a Pez. Okay, so that's everything for this block. We'll go back and look at the picture once again. So here's the picture of our block. Oh, I had my fish going up and down instead of side to side. When you go through to put this block together, you end up rotating every other block anyway, so just depends on which one you want. But there's a picture of a 9-block layout, and once again, here's an image of the actual block. Hope you have fun with that one. We'll see you next month. Thanks. Bye now.